Hello everyone, welcome to another video. This is part 3 of my Gateway API video series for Kubernetes. In this video, I want to show you how you can host multiple applications inside AKS and access them through one gateway. The plan for today is I'm going to show you an overview of the architecture, what we have built so far. Then we're going to deploy 2 test apps, and we're also going to test and access them. As always, if you want to get the slides or all the demo code I present today, you can scan the QR code, or you will also find the link in the description down below. Now let's take a look at the overview of what we did in the last video. In the last video, we created our Kubernetes cluster. I created a new AKS cluster, since everything I do is hosted on Azure. Then we created our ALB controller. This stands for Application Load Balancer. And this controller integrates with Azure. This means it has a link to the Azure Resource Manager, and through this link we were able to create the application gateway for a container. This application gateway for a container will take care of features like TLS termination and also load balancing. What we don't see here is we also created an additional resource, the gateway, which lives inside our AKS cluster. And today we're going to configure this gateway to route our traffic to 2 different applications, depending on how we call these applications. If you take a look at the routing, here you can see how it can work. So it could be, for example, that you call it with different URLs. These URLs are both pointing to the same gateway, and then the gateway decides where this request should go. We'll also see that we have one additional resource that sits in between the gateway and our pods. So this would be inside the Kubernetes cluster. That's the HTTPRoute. And there again, we can configure how we want to access our pods, how we want to route our traffic. And in future videos, I'll also show you how we can extend this. Setting up all of this can be really complicated. And I think the last video can be, especially for a beginner, too much. But today we're going to be more practical. We are done with the configuration. Now we can actually use it. And also in the future videos, we have now set the foundation and we just add more features and have great demos. With this, let's switch over to the terminal and let's get started deploying our first applications. All right, here in the terminal, let's define a couple variables first. So this is a namespace where we have deployed our application load balancer, as well as the name of our gateway. I haven't mentioned it before, but I'm following up on my last video. So if you haven't seen it, I would recommend you to take a look at the video where we set up everything. And now I'm continuing on this. As always, you will have all the code there, so you can just copy and paste and set up your cluster. With this said, now let's add a couple more variables. These variables are for our demo application. So I'm going to deploy Nginx, and therefore I'm going to create a new namespace. I set the name of the Nginx deployment. We're going to configure an HTTP route. Therefore, we can route our traffic to our Nginx pods. And in the end, I'm going to show you how we can configure a URL. Before I get started, I also want to show you something from the gateway, just to a refresher from the last video. The gateway gives us a host name, and we can use this host name to access the gateway and then route our traffic from the gateway to our pods. And we can do this either with the kubectl commands, so you can query for the host name. So I'm going to paste it here, and we can see this is the Azure provided host name. So for now, we're going to use this one. But we can also take a look at the entire configuration of our gateway. So a kubectl get gateway, we provide the name and the namespace. Here we can see all the listeners we have. In our case, it's only going to be one for HTTP. That's up here. Then we have our gateway class. This is the link to the Azure application gateway for a container. And down here, we have our host name and the value. That's the same value we have seen before. Let me also switch over to the Azure portal and show you quickly there how it looks, and then we get started deploying our application. Here in the Azure portal, there's everything we have created in the last video. So we have two resource groups. The first resource group contains our AKS cluster and the managed identity. The managed identity is used by the application load balancer to access the Azure Resource Manager. And through this connection, we could create our container, our application gateway for a container. In the second resource group, we have everything that belongs to our Kubernetes cluster, like the VNet and the virtual machine scale sets that host our nodes, as well as the application gateway for a container. If we open this, we can see some configuration options, not too many, but what we can see here on the front end is the link to the gateway. And here, if you remember the full qualified domain name I showed before, this is exactly the same we have seen before. So here you can see that there's the link from the application gateway to the gateway inside of Kubernetes. Additionally, we can also see here the association, and this is the link from the application gateway to the subnet in our AKS cluster. But for all the details, please take a look at the video from last week. With this said, now let's switch back to the terminal and let's actually get started deploying our first test application. Back in the terminal, let's create a new namespace. And this already shows one of the great advantages of using the Gateway API, that the gateway and the applications can be in completely different namespaces, and it still works because the Gateway API can work all over the namespaces. There are no boundaries. Once you have set up the namespace, let's configure our deployment. So I'm going to copy everything in a variable. And if you scroll through this, you can see it's as simple as it can be. So first we're going to create a deployment. With one replica set, we provide the name from the variable and we listen on port 80. And we also use the image Nginx. Then we are going to create a service of type cluster IP. This is important. This means our service is not accessible from the internet or from outside the cluster, but it will be accessible because we go through the gateway and then to our service. And lastly, we configure that we're listening on port 80 and we send our request to the pods on port 80. So fairly standard deployment. Then I'm going to apply this file or this variable. So this now creates the service and the pods, which should only take a couple seconds. And then we can check if everything is created. So I do a kubectl get all in the namespace. And here we can see we have our service of type cluster IP. We have our deployment with one pod ready. And if you scroll up a bit, we can see here our pod is running. So everything works as expected. Now we can configure how we want to route from the gateway to our Nginx pod. And to do this, we use a so-called HTTP route. The reason why we use the HTTP route is we are routing HTTP traffic. If you have a TCP, gRPC, TLS, then you would obviously use for example, TCP route. But to keep it simple, we use the HTTP route. So there's a Kubernetes object of type HTTP route. Then we provide a name and in what namespace we want to deploy it. So here again, you can see everything is in the Nginx namespace. Nothing is in the gateway namespace. But we have down here a reference to our gateway. So we provide the name and in what namespace it is deployed. And then we define how we want to route our traffic. In this case, we keep it as simple as possible. So we just route every traffic on port 80 to our service with the name of Nginx. In a later video, I'm going to show you how we can make it more complicated. But for now, to get started, let's keep it as simple as possible. Then we're going to apply this variable. This should only take around a second. And then we can check that this has been successfully applied. So we do a kubectl get HTTPRoute. we provide the name and the namespace. Here we can see we don't have any error messages. We can see here it was accepted, and now the reason is programmed and the status is true. This means everything has been updated successfully. And if we scroll up, we can also see here our backend information. So we send it to a service with the name Nginx and on port 80. We can also see the path. So we route everything to this pod or to this service. So now we can already test it. The way we test it is we need our full qualified domain name, because that's the one the gateway is listening to. And then the gateway sends every traffic to our Nginx pod. So what we can do now is a curl. We do HTTP and we provide the full qualified domain name we copied before. Then we execute this. And if you scroll up a bit, we can see here we have HTTP 200 and everything is okay. This means we were just able to access our Nginx pod through the gateway. So that's already a great first step. But what we configured right now is that we send every traffic we have to our Nginx pods. In a cluster, you have usually multiple applications, but right now it wouldn't work. So to get it working as a first step, I want to update our HTTPRoute. So I'm going to paste it again in the terminal. And what I have changed here is the path. So in this case, I say only send everything with /nginx to our Nginx service. If I only call the same URL as before, HTTP, and then the full qualified domain name, it won't pick up and I won't be redirected to our Nginx service. I'm going to apply this file again. Here in the browser, we can see if I just call the full qualified domain name we've seen before, I get this 404 error. But if I call it with /nginx, then I get now still a 404, but I get it from Nginx. And the reason why I get the 404 from Nginx is it hasn't configured the index page on /nginx. It is configured on just /. But this is something we'll fix later. For now, we have seen that we can access our Nginx service through our URL. Now let's switch back to the terminal and let's create a second demo application. For our second demo application, I'm doing almost the same, except this time I'm using traffic. So I provide a new namespace name, again, a new name for the HTTP route, for the application name, and also a separate URL. Once we have defined this, we're going to create our new namespace. And then again, we create a deployment and a service. And again, I keep it as simple as possible. So it's basically the same as before, just with a different name and different container. So if you take a look at here, this time, again, a deployment of the name traffic in the traffic namespace. Again, with one replica. If you scroll down a bit, we use the image from traffic, the so-called who am I, because it gives some information of what pod is running, which can be interesting. And all the way down with the service, it's exactly the same as before. So again, we have a cluster IP type and we listen on port 80 and we send our requests to the pods on port 80. So let's write this into the variable and then we are going to apply the variable. So this again will take a couple seconds for our pods to start and the service to be created. And also again, we can do a kubectl get all, but this time in the traffic namespace. Here we can see we also have here our service of the cluster IP. We have up here our deployment, actually our pod with one pod running, and also the deployment says one pods ready. So everything as expected. Here also, we're going to now create our HTTP route. And this time I'm already creating it with the path. So in this case, I'm using /traffic. The rest is the same. I provide the name and the namespace of our traffic. Then I provide the reference to our gateway and also what namespace the gateway is in, and the backend service, which is the traffic service we have just deployed. Then we're going to apply this HTTP route. Then we're going to wait a couple seconds for everything to apply, and then we switch back to the browser and let's see if we can access our traffic now. So here we're going to change from Nginx to traffic, and we can see we were able to access our service and therefore our pods, and we can see here the name of our pod where it's running. So everything works as expected. So here we're going to change from Nginx to traffic. And we can see we were able to access our application. We can see here the name of the pod that served the request, and everything works as expected. This showed we were able to host 2 applications and we can access them through our gateway. But right now we're using the full qualified domain name of the gateway, which is not a nice name, and we also have to use /traffic or /nginx to access our applications. That's also something our customers wouldn't be happy with. Now I'm going to update our HTTP route so I can use my own URL. And in the next videos, I'm going to show you how you can configure this. So in the next video, we're going to configure our DNS. And then in the 2 videos after, we're also going to configure TLS. This means we can use HTTPS, and once it's configured, everything will be done automatically. But for now, let's switch back to the terminal and update our HTTP route so we can use our own URL. Before we do this, I've seen that I had a mistake in my Nginx URL variable. So I had here demo dot. This was just from me from testing, so I removed this. And the way this will work is this URL, the nginx.programmingwithwolfgang.com, is already pointing to the CNAME of the gateway. In the next video, as I said, I will show you how we can configure this. For now, just remember that the DNS is already configured. With this in place, we can now update our HTTP route. The only thing that I changed is here the hostname section. Here I provide the URL I want to use. That's the Nginx one we have just seen. Then we're going to apply this HTTP route. Once this is applied, we're going to do the same with our traffic route. So let's clean up this terminal, paste our new route, and here also I have everything the same as before, except I provide under host names the URL to traffic. Then we are also going to apply this route. Now we can switch back to the browser and test if everything works as expected. Back in the browser, let's paste the URL. So that's the nginx.programmingwithwolfgang.com. Now we'll get an error message because we don't have a certificate right now. This is something we're going to configure in the next couple of videos. For now, we can just continue the site. Here we can see we have now our welcome page. Now it also works because we are in the root folder, so just in the /, and this is where our Nginx welcome page waits for us. So everything works, and we were able to use our own URL. Now I can change the Nginx part to traffic. Then again, we'll get the error message about the missing certificate. We just ignore this for now. Here we can see we have the same pod serving us as before, since you only have one, and we were able to access our URL, our application through our own URL. With this approach, you can host as many applications as you want in your Kubernetes cluster, and all you have to do is create a new HTTP route, provide a reference to the gateway, and then you're able to access your application through the gateway. This is everything I wanted to show you today. So to summarize what we did, we have here our gateway inside the Kubernetes cluster. Then we deployed our 2 test applications. We used Nginx and traffic, but you can use whatever application you want. And lastly, we configured here in blue our HTTP routes for both applications, and these HTTP routes told the gateway how to route the traffic to our applications. So for the first one, we had our own URL with nginx.programmingwithwolfgang.com. Once the gateway receives this call, then it knows what HTTP route to use, and then it routes it to our nginx application. The same with traffic. So if you have traffic.programmingwithwolfgang.com, it uses the other route, the one of the traffic, and then it routes it to our traffic service and therefore to our pods. So if you take a look back at this graph, what we've seen before, this is exactly what we did. So we have here two different URLs. Then the gateway decides where these URLs are routed and what pods will serve this request. This worked because my DNS is already pointing at this gateway. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how you can configure our DNS that your own URLs will point to the gateway. And in the following videos, we'll extend this and also implement HTTPS. This means TLS. But we're going to reuse everything we have used so far. So there's not much new. We're just going to extend, for example, the HTTP route that we can also listen for HTTPS. But once you have understand the concepts we've looked at so far, it's not going to get much more complicated. Actually, I think it's going to get easier because you will have more practice in using it. You will have more understanding. And so with every video, hopefully to become more and more an expert. If you have any questions, if something is unclear, please leave a comment down below. If you have any requests for future videos about the gateway, Kubernetes, anything you want to see, also tell me in the comments. And I would highly appreciate if you would like the video. If you liked it, this would help to share the videos, to spread it. And with this, I hope to see you next week with the DNS configuration and a new video.